sky. Episode 2.
Hey again, folks. Thank you for coming back. I'm glad to say that I'm still here. It's a beautiful day in Belfast. I look out the window, the butterflies are circling each other, the bees are buzzing. Sun's out, just a lovely day, and I'm stuck inside. But you know what? It's all to the good. Past few nights been a little deceptive, would probably be the best description. Ever since that mirror shattered, there's been this kind of eerie stillness, like you kind of get before a storm. I'm not taking it for granted that this is how it's going to be going forward, but I have been sleeping outside, and I know that ain't normal, but you know, the fresh air and open sky feel a lot safer than inside this house where I am right now. And that's not a good place to be in. I completely understand that, but let me describe it. There's kind of a coldness in here. Like, I'm sitting here now recording this, and well, it's not really so much of a coldness as it's a clamminess that kind of creeps over your skin if you're in here for too long. It feels like nails just kind of dragging across your skin. Don't like it, but you know, that's not happening right now. Right now, everything feels okay. But honestly as well, like, it's not just in here. Whenever I go for a hike, whenever I go to the store to grab groceries, there's kind of a paranoia that I just can't shake off. Like, there are eyes boring into the back of my head that I'm being watched. And so I think it's absolutely safe to say the dread is not gone. It feels like it is biding its time. And while I've got a gap, while I'm able to, I want to dive into research, which absolutely does not naturally come to me. I'm a very reactive person, but I know that I cannot do that with this. I can't just react to something so dangerous. I have to be prepared. So I've done the only thing I really knew what to do, which is, you know, outside of speaking to the doctor, waiting for blood tests back there, I've spent kind of countless hours trawling the internet, just searching for something, anything that can explain what's been happening to me. And so I've been going to paranormal forums, YouTube videos, reading tons of fiction, like not kind of published fiction. I'm talking about the kind of thing that gets posted on Reddit pages. You know, kind of not exactly high art that's being studied, but still things that I can draw from and be like, has somebody experienced this? Is somebody writing about this somewhere? Is there anything there which is similar to what I've got? And one thing that did kind of come up was sleep paralysis studies. And, you know, kind of put that in there. But let me just say, like, before I kind of move on, immersing myself in such a corrosive part of the internet that's kind of adjacent to conspiracy theories and weirdness is not exactly been healthy. I'm very kind of like rock solid though as a person, so I'm able to kind of like look at this and say, okay, that's a bit bizarre. But then I am reading this from the perspective of, oh no, that's kind of weird, but it's not weird enough for what's happening to me. So yeah, I'm in a bit of an odd spot at the moment. But yeah, I've not experienced sleep paralysis, is what I was saying there. But, you know, traditional sleep paralysis where you wake up and you have that feeling. But that first encounter when I was meditating, when I was in the bath, that was a lot like sleep paralysis. For those who don't know, sleep paralysis is where you wake up in your bed and you have no control over your body. You're lying in your bed and you feel like somebody is in the doorway, somebody else is in the room, you have no power, you are completely helpless, and you just have like a terror like coursing through you. It does not sound pleasant, but I've not experienced that when I wake up. But the meditation when I was in the bath, it feels very much like that. I kind of, you know, the paralysis of the body, the awareness of what's going on. And a lot of sleep paralysis, there's a sensation of being pressed down. And I definitely felt that. It was a very physical sensation for me, but it kind of matches up with it. And I know that I was not asleep during that. I know that I was not asleep, and I know that this is not me dreaming like this, if that makes any sense. It's not me experiencing something that medical science has kind of like recognized, because the other night I held up a mirror and there are still pieces of glass that, that's not pieces of glass in my hand anymore. I was about to call it a gash. It's a small cut. There's a small cut on my hand proving that this is real. But adding sleep paralysis helped the search parameters, the same as adding in lost dreams, nightmare trees, and horrific things that are just out of sight. So, anything that can add to my search or looking into this has been good to strip away things that do not matter. Because there's way, way too much out there, and it took me getting very lucky more than anything to find something which ties in with my experience. And before I go on, I just want to say where all this has led me is wild. I'm not overselling this. I found some really messed up stuff that only supports that really nasty nighttime thought that I'm probably going to die. So I'm very comfortable online, and I think that's a ridiculous statement to make because most people are at this point in 2024. But I'm very comfortable in that there's 2 decades of professional experience with online communities and all the oddballs that lie therein. So I say that I'm comfortable with the internet, not just because I use the internet a lot. It's because I understand the internet, and it's given me a kind of insight into what's useful and what's a waste of everybody's time. And a lot of the time, there's not a lot of daylight between the good and the garbage. But honestly, if you're objective, you can typically tell. If you've been around long enough, you can smell the bullshit. And, you can tell when trends are really driving things. So, for example, there was a real eruption in horror stories written from a personal perspective as if they're real early on. And that's never really gone away. It's never really settled down. And a lot of modern myth making and storytelling came from that, which is incredibly admirable. It's, kind of humanity finding new ways to kind of tell stories to each other. But that can make it very hard to cut through and find something useful for when you're experiencing things that are similar to that. For example, sleep paralysis is such a scary concept that it's the bedrock for a lot of those early 2000 tales. So rather than really go broad with this, I started drilling down into old forums and subreddits, into Facebook community groups, and using the Wayback Machine to dredge up old links to, kind of dead web pages. And when you're looking at this stuff with the, I don't want to say benefit, I think the misfortune of experience, all of it sticks with you really hard. Kids walking around corners and vanishing. Just sudden nightmarish deaths, and people who just live with the whispers of the dead. And they're not pleasant whispers. And, when you're reading that with the benefit of understanding that, hey, maybe this is real, you kind of come to the conclusion that there's just a constant thrum and hum of activity that shows we're in a pretty haunted world. And I believe it. I have to believe it from what I've been seeing. There's still a lot of things that don't ring true, but there's some things on there which is completely inexplainable. So, because it can't all be real, right? But some of it has to be. Otherwise, what's going on with me? Otherwise, kind of some of it has to be real because what's happening to me is real. So yeah, I began working my way through these groups and forums, and it was on one specific, practically forgotten, pretty much dead forum dedicated to the paranormal that I started to make some headway. So this place, I'm not going to share it, by the way, because I don't expect anybody to be listening to this, but I don't want to, kind of give it undue kind of attention. I know that can happen with anything. So it's almost dead. It gets a couple of posts a week these days. It's got that outdated V-Bulletin theming that has way too much going on. It's a almost black page, and everything like on it is kind of outlined in white, but it's not a clean white, not a modern kind of like white color. You know, there's a lot of declarations of it's this user's birthday today at the bottom, and also kind of a little bar that tells me how many people were online in 2010, which was the peak for users. So there you go. And I mean, it was still really cool to me. It's kind of welcoming to go to something that is so badly formatted in this kind of age of the nightmare algorithm. And I mean, well, until I tried to make an account and it took more than a few clicks, I don't miss that at all. It was really frustrating. But once I kind of got signed up there and started doing a scan through to find which section would be the most relevant, I started not to expect very much from it. It was just the usual kind of ghost stories, UFO sightings mixed with. There was a whole period like where self-important manic posting was just a big thing. You know, you would have narcissists in forums who would hook believers into their kind of like life, and they were the worst people. I mean, if you weren't there, you would think to yourself, how could anybody want to be this person's friend? They are insufferable. But there's so much of that post in there. And it was also unbelievably horny all the time. And again, if you weren't around then, maybe you don't know what I'm talking about, but it was the kind of posting which is kind of like, werewolves aren't real, but my kind of legally distinct new age fuckable werewolves are real style posts, and they're written by that same insufferable kind of narcissist. So I did get a good laugh, I will say, about an admin post calling for this kind of posting to stop. I haven't got it written down here. I wish I'd noted it, but it was very much like, you know, this is a place to discuss serious topics, and like, they were discussing like kind of the thing that was really kind of drove this was kind of people in relationships with the ghosts in their house. It was legitimately funny. It got a really good laugh out of me, and you know, yeah. So when that stopped, that's when this forum went into decline. If you take away the horny posting on a paranormal forum, I think is the lesson here. It's going to die. Like, there's no probably going to die about it. It's going to die. So yeah, that's when the kind of descent began. So all of this up till then really was a fun trip back in time, and it wasn't very useful until, you know, a kind of search I was running and just kind of like looking at some posts. I kind of found some from 2012 that really struck a chord. They were eerily similar to my own experiences with some really distinct differences. So I'm going to call this user Dane. I'm not going to give their real name again. I don't want anybody kind of finding this person or kind of trying to find them, because, you know, I don't think that kind of thing is fair. They went to a forum with a kind of username for a reason. They did not want to put their kind of like personal life on show. So it's only fair to respect that, I always believe. But their story is similar to mine, but it was also really unsettling. It did not start out unsettling, but where it goes, I really didn't enjoy where it went. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the posts. I'll give a little bit of commentary as we go, and, you know, kind of pull it back to what we know, what we can kind of like, what we've learned from this. And yeah, it's kind of disturbing, I will say, like, you know, kind of, I don't want to scare you, but I might. Be forewarned. Forum post title, Need Help, March 15th, 2012. Hey everyone, I'm not sure how to start this, but I've been going through something really weird, and I need to know if anyone else has experienced the same thing. For the past few weeks, I felt like I'm being watched, like there's something just out of sight, and when I wake up, I can't move, and there's something in the room with me, but I can't open my eyes. I hate it. It's a really ugly feeling, and I can't remember my dreams anymore. At first, I thought this was just stress, but it's been getting a lot worse. I'm scared to go to sleep, and I'm tired all the time, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. I've looked online, but there's not much out there which feels right. Has anyone else felt something like this? What did you do about it? I'm desperate for answers. Thanks in advance. So this initial post of theirs really resonated with me. That overwhelming sense of being watched and paralyzing fear. It was familiar, even if it's not exactly the same, right? And the responses they received on the forum thread, they range from really helpful. People were linking them to, that sounds like sleep paralysis, here are some studies, to cranks who would kind of ask their vaccine status. Yeah, it was 2012 and that was a thing even then. So the forum wasn't exactly bustling at that point. The thread hadn't really picked up much steam. And the poster Dane, he came back a few times and, kind of responded saying thank you to people, kind of keeping the thread alive. And there were a few deleted posts where I assumed that it went off topic or got a little bit heated. And after that, they continued to document their escalation. So this next post comes a week later. March 22nd, 2012. Hi everyone, sorry for going quiet and thanks to some of you for the responses. For others, I'd like to answer that this is very real to me and not a joke. I took the advice of some of you and have started to look into doctors. I don't have insurance, but I agree that this needs to be done. I can tell here who doesn't live in the States because go to see a doctor is a decision that I cannot make lightly with my current living situation. I also tried some of the other suggestions some of you made and nothing has really helped. But I did begin making notes. The waking part is obviously what's causing me the most distress, but this presence also feels stronger at dusk, so maybe I can find a pattern, I can figure out how to stop it. Here are the past 2 nights where I barely know what I was talking about. Air felt thick, choking on cotton, couldn't move, can't breathe, it breathes, it moves, felt like hours, time 5:23. Couldn't open mouth, nostrils pinched, screaming in throat, shaking, whispers on pillow, time 5:28. The timing interests me because it's always around dawn and it was still dark out when I got up, but still in a kind of half light. I don't know. If anybody has more advice, please share. I'm willing to try anything at this point. April 5th, 2012. Things have gotten bad. I've been trying to piece together what's happening, but it feels like I'm fighting a losing battle. The presence is always there, waiting. I've stopped going out, barely sleep, and health is falling apart. My friends have started to notice, but when I try to explain it, they were so understanding, I knew they thought I was in the middle of a mental breakdown. I slept at one of their houses the other night. They put me up in the guest room and sat with me all evening. It was good and chill. We watched movies, talked about school rumors that we never confirmed, had a few drinks, a lot of laughs, and I felt stable, balanced, and that everything was okay. Then I went to bed, and on the curtains, the shadows of tree branches started stroking the glass. I thought I was awake, maybe I was, I don't know. I just stared and stared as the shadows crept across the floor, under the bed covers, and started to tighten around my legs and then my waist, into my veins, winding into my guts, up and through my heart like cold needles. I was screaming the entire time, but I knew I wasn't making a sound. It went on for so long, I don't remember anything but pain and that my eyes were sore from tears. When I was finally able to move, I ran to try and tell my friend, but I was just screaming at her from the bedroom doorway, drenched in sweat with no filter. Her and her boyfriend helped me down the stairs, and they would have called an ambulance if I hadn't begged them not to. No insurance still, and not much chance of getting it either. They were worried for me, so scared for me, but they were also scared for themselves. I looked and sounded like I'd lost it. I don't know what to do. All of my notes are a mess. My head is fried. Please help me. So those 2 posts there, and just to make you aware, like the difference in spelling and grammar between those 2 posts is night and day. In the second post, it was absolutely in free fall. They started to become broken up, and I cleared up some of the syntax as I was reading it, but it quite obviously had started to weigh upon them. And yeah, I recognize what they're talking about. And the fact that they're talking about the tree, especially, concerns me in just very deep ways. I'll come to that and I'll discuss that, like, maybe later. But it's all getting a little real, like, with this. I feel so sorry for them. I can feel what they're really going through. I really appreciate what they made a note on the time. I've not been paying attention to that, but maybe I should start my own journal, because dawn and dusk being a factor is never something I considered. You always think nighttime is the bad time, but when I think about it, I've been waking up around the same time. And there was one time when I didn't sleep. I'd had such a bad night's sleep that I kind of passed out around early afternoon, and I was woken up from the same kind of nightmares around 9ish. That kind of like tense feeling when the presence is there. It was around 9ish, and sundown is pretty late in Belfast, so it kind of matches up. So yeah, I need to start making my own notes, and I wish I could hug this person, and I really want to thank them for that, because that is information which is valuable. It's interesting. It's something that I can track. The other users of the site started to get really concerned around this point, and the suggested help that they gave was a lot more about self-care than spirituality, which on a forum like this is a real show that somebody's hit a mark and that something is seriously, seriously wrong. April 7th, 2012. Something new, not positive, but definitely new today. I've been noticing people hanging around wherever I am. I picked up on two of them, a man and a woman. Not close, but focused on me. Their clothes don't quite fit. They're decent clothes, expensive looking, but too big and rumpled, like they haven't been taken off in a while or were grabbed from a pile on the ground. They've got hats and sunglasses on, but I can tell they're watching me. And I wasn't sure until I started to move toward them, and they took off. The next time I let them lurk around, but kept an eye out, and they followed me from store to store. They're white, lumpfish grey-white, and their skin is splotchy. The man is always licking the stubble around his lips, and the woman's chin is just too low into her chest, like she's always tilted forward. There's an off smell around them too. When I tried to follow, I picked up on it. A burnt heroin tinge. I caught a whiff of that on a bus once, and it almost made me feel sick, and it's almost exactly the same as that, but heavier. I'm trying to get pictures of them. I don't know how they're involved, but they have to be, right? They have to be. April 10th, 2012. It's 1. I hate this. I can't do anything. I'm done. It's in my head, and I'm out of it. I hear things all the time now. Chittering and chattering, just around corners or up the stairs or down them. It leeches on my spirit, these ghosts now. They're always there, and I know what they are. They tell me, like moths to my dark. It's not just spirits, there's other things. The other night I went to close my window and it crawled across the glass. More legs than a spider. Chitinous legs and a fat swollen body like a pregnant cow. It was sliding down, barely able to skitter across. It was the size of a fist. I slammed the window shut and it perched on the sill, clacking the glass with its legs. Its head, the hairless horse head. Its distended mouth crackling out a scream that was half radio static and half childlike squeal, and it just sat watching me with blind, roomy eyes. I hated it. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop thinking about it being under my bed. I can't stop thinking about it crawling over my face when I can't move. Stepping on it when I get out of bed, and feeling that ugly flesh nuzzle my foot. I've become a beacon for nightmares, and I feel like I'm going to cry all the time. Nobody can help me. It's just like being a kid again. The talk of other things and being drawn to them. I don't know. I feel like I've not experienced anything like that yet. I felt things that are quite off, but and people watching with the stalkers, I've not seen any sign of people watching me. There's a paranoia there, but I haven't felt that. But the description of them, it does remind me of an encounter that I had in the hospice where my grandfather died. This was around 4 years ago. But, everything was weird in those days. Everything was just really off. And I haven't really thought about this in years. It was it was one of the worst nights of my life and just an encounter in the hallway. But the smell, they mentioned the off-white skin. It's given me a lot to think about there. So, but that's not actually all. Like, their final post was removed by a forum admin and the thread was locked, citing concerns for Dane's mental health. There had been a lot of outcry for some time from other users about the posts that were being made, and I've not shared everything here. You can imagine they continued in the same vein for several pages, very distressing descriptions of things. And before the ban, the degeneration of their post was very, very pronounced. So this is where it ended. Admin post, April 21st, 2012. Due to concerns for the user's mental health and the nature of their posting, we have decided to delete their final post here on the forum and restrict further discussion on this topic. We encourage the user and anyone else experiencing similar distress to seek professional help. And while we appreciate the community's efforts to provide support, there comes a time to recognise when we are doing more harm than good. In all honesty, I agreed with the ban. Dane had begun to ramble for pages at this point with no acknowledgement of others' posts, and it was distressing to read. It was upsetting. From where they were to get to where they ended up was distressing, especially knowing that this is not somebody, this isn't a mental health crisis. This isn't an issue that they're just going through. Even a mental health crisis is still a crisis, right? It's still something which deserves to be treated with seriousness, and the person deserves to be treated with respect. But there's also a kind of sadness to knowing that they could not have gotten help, even if they were, no matter what they did, they were kind of locked on a course here because nobody recognized what they were really dealing with. But what got me here from this was a potentially deleted post, and that made me reach out to the admin. It seemed to me like there was a final post, which was, the straw that broke the camel's back, and I really wanted to kind of get a look at that. And, I just desperately, I really wanted to know more. This was a person who had already shown me or flagged up a couple of things, and honestly, if this is the path that I'm on, if these are the kind of experiences that I can expect to have, if this is where it's going, I want to be as well armed as possible. And if I can draw parallels with their experience, put it on a board, match it up, and try and find a way to deal with this, all to the better. So one thing to understand about any forum is that when posts are deleted, they are not actually deleted. There needs to be a record for law enforcement, or just to ensure that whatever's been deleted was taken away for a decent reason. So, any post that was there back then is still accessible if you have the right access. And 12 years is a long time, and there's a decent chance that, these posts might have gotten purged at some point. The site's not exactly well maintained, and no offense to the admin standing guard over this site, but it does not seem like a place where they've been kind of clearing out the trash. And so the concept of these posts still being accessible, that matters to me. That's something which I can count on and I can action. And if there's one thing I need to be able to do right now, it is action something. So upon seeing the admin's note, I knew that I had to reach out to them. I contacted them. I explained the situation. I sent them a PM talking about the striking similarities between my experience and these posts. And the reason I did that rather than make something up or try some way around it is I hope that somebody is deeply involved on a site like this. That mystery would be pretty irresistible to them if I'm coming to them politely and respectfully and, you know, in a decent tone of voice. You know, that irresistible mystery of highlighting the similarities between somebody in the States and me in Belfast. You know, I hope that that was enough bait on the hook for them to say, hey, let's do this. And they didn't reply immediately, but the next day through this archaic, private messaging system, we kind of discussed how things stood. And being polite can get you anything in this world. I genuinely believe it. If you treat somebody with respect, they will recognize that. And so we had a respectful discussion about it. And given the age of the posts there and my reasoning, they agreed to share the deleted post with me, and they absolutely emphasized that it was removed for the user's own good, which I absolutely agree with and believe was the right call. So I had to take a break before I could bring myself to read that post. And I still am, I'm pretty disturbed because attracting what the user says as ghosts and weird things. Some of the descriptions of things that they were talking about around their bed, and just I don't like things that fly. I don't like things that crawl. I guess I don't really like anything that I don't like anything that should not be there. I don't think anybody does, but I really did not enjoy reading that. And honestly, parts of it really rang true. And Dane's crash into paranoia terrified me. I mentioned just then that it felt like a different person from the beginning to where we ended up, and I don't want that to happen to me. So I took myself outside. I washed the bees with a couple of caps of sugar water for them, got comfortable in the sunlight because, I did not know what to expect. And it's not that the tone of the post is different or worse. If anything, the deleted post is more lucid than many of the ones that came before it, with a lot of focus. But there's a lot of finality to it. And I found that deeply, deeply unsettling. Dane's last post, April 21st, 2012. Its weight is crushing my breath. I struggle to breathe all the time. It's hard, so hard to draw in any breath. It's like watching my grandpa die from the inside. Emphysema got him bad. It made me swear off smokes, but now all I can taste is nicotine and my lungs are heavy with tar. Every time I half close my eyes, I can sense it waiting for me just over my shoulder. I can't remember when I last ate, but it had the flavor of ash and the texture of cigarettes. The more water I drink, the worse I feel, like it's dehydrating me, and my brain feels tight in my skull. This morning, everything blended together. The dreams didn't end up pulling me out of sleep completely. I was half in, I was half out. I could feel the sheets beneath me. I could feel the pillow cradling my head, but I couldn't move a muscle. My eyes were the only things that could move, but I don't even know if they were open or still looking at nightmares. I could feel it as always, the presence just out of sight, filling the room. I couldn't call for help. I was locked inside my own body with that thick, suffocating air, like trying to breathe through a wet blanket or drowning in treacle. My breath kept hitching and halting, gagging, and then just stopped. I knew I wasn't breathing, but I couldn't do anything about it. Then there was a warm, moist breath on the side of my dick. Slow, deliberate exhalations, and the rank smell of an ashtray. Then the whispers started, low and guttural. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I knew they were meant for me. They came from all around, echoing off the walls, filling the room with a chorus. It was my name repeated over and over, croaky, raspy voices struggling to say it. Shrinking into the back of my mind, I watched an eclipse burn a hole into the ceiling. Then I heard them. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth outside my bedroom door. Creak of floorboards, rustle of clothing. I knew it was my stalkers. They stopped outside my door and I could hear their raggedy breathing, just like the presence in my room, in sync, sharing the same breath, with the same malignant intent. I tried to scream, I tried to move, but I was a prisoner in my own flesh. I stared at the circle and it bored into my eyes, tearing down my optical nerves. There were things moving in the hole. I don't know how long I was there, paralyzed, helpless, on the edge of death, not breathing, my heart slow, time lost all meaning. It could have been minutes, it could have been hours. There was a time when I could feel skittering things crawling over my belly and over my thighs. A crab from the window, probably, burrowing under the blankets. I could feel it nibbling on my hip skin. At one point, the door opened and that junky smell burnt my nostrils. It was even stronger on the fingertips that caressed my cheeks with sharp nails and callous skin. I didn't see them, but knowing a real physical person stood next to me while I was helpless, it hurts to think about. I eventually woke up alone, and I've been crying a lot this morning. I'm just exhausted. I need to go to the police. They started emptying my apartment, and it looks like they just swept belongings into bags. There's picture frames on the floor. It's all a mess. I'm done with it all. How can I experience this and not even care? I'd already pulled together a Google Drive with everything I have on it. You can find it here in case I don't come back and maybe someone can make sense of this. There's pictures of those bastards and stuff that might be connected. You can't help me. I can't help myself. I think this is over. And I'm happy about that. So that deleted post was so defeated. Still slightly manic, but clinical and removed. And I understand why the admin read that as being upsetting to other users and also telling the user to get help. It was the only thing that they could do. And one thing that really stood out to me after reading that was I can't let myself be scared when I'm not being scared, because if this is what's coming for me, I need to be prepared more than anything. I need to understand it, because I don't know if there's a way to stop this, but I need to figure it out. And to start with that, I need to find out how Dane's story ends. There's going to be plenty of time for fear in the moment, but I have a day job to do. I need to go and do that. I need to get my mind away from this stuff because I'm not a natural investigator, and being organized takes a toll for somebody with my kind of mindset. But it's difficult to move on, but there's a couple of the things that I want to wrap up on here. I thought were going to be quite simple, but so the admin messaged me just before I began recording, and they can't share the user's email with me, which I think is absolutely fair and good on them for caring about the privacy of their users. Honestly, there's enough information here, especially with the Google Drive, that I can probably find out who they were. I really want to find a social media presence. I want to see where they are now, what happened to them. And if they're fine, all to the good. That would be the ideal for me. They say, yeah, I'm okay. But hopefully when we start looking down that's what we're going to find. But what the admin did say to me was, because they were quite invested in what I was telling them, without wanting to break, break the trust that they have with their users, with, the privacy of their users. What they did say was that the user had an account about 8 years before this began. And that account was posting, about quite different things. But it seemed that, they would probably have lost their login and maybe didn't even have access to the email. Still, you know how it is. So they just re-signed up because it's a completely different thing anyway. But the admin added me to a sub-forum with all those posts in it. So I'm going to spend some time going through that. I mean, I'm really grateful. What they did was they moved those posts to a place where I had access to, and so I would be able to read through it. And they also told me that some of the deletions in the user's thread were for spam links. Apparently, there was a lot of spam directing people to the Society for Cultural and Historical Research. And there'll be a lot of these links in these kind of threads by accounts that just signed up and accounts that just signed up to post the link, and it became a point to just remove them. And in the end, just kind of like banned links to that site because nobody knew what the deal was. I don't know if there's anything to look into there, but I'll take a look into it. I do appreciate the admin taking this seriously for me, by the way. It's more than I ever could have expected. But just like before, I'm kind of babbling because this is actually where it gets quite scary. This is why I need to step away, and why I'm convinced that absolutely everything here links up with me in Belfast and 12 years ago, somebody in the United States of America. I took a glance over the Google Drive, and there's so much information there. You can tell that Dane was getting fairly manic with what they were kind of like putting in, but they were still more organized than I ever would have been. And some of this is password protected, but there's a lot of like copies of studies, copied threads from foreign language forums, and the pictures that they mentioned. And the pictures are 2012 like pictures, so not as good as 2024 pictures, but the only one that I really looked at was pretty grainy. It showed a gangly man with off-kilter shoulders in a baggy blue shirt and a Chicago Bears baseball cap, just pulled down over aviator sunglasses. His tongue's kind of hanging out over his bottom lip, and he almost looks like he's superimposed onto the street. And it's one of the stalkers. They mentioned the actual title of the picture is like Stalker 1, the stalker Dane was talking about. And as I mentioned before, like, hey, that sounds pretty familiar, something there. Well, this is where it gets really creepy. That night that my grandfather died, it was outside of his room, and I can remember the smell that Dane talks about there, because I've had a similar experience where I inhaled this kind of, it's something which smells like nothing else. And that night, we associate smells with these things, and that night was one of the most horrible nights of my life. And it smelled like death. It just smelled awful, rotten, vile. And I remember being in the hallway talking to the nurse. My granddad was in palliative care, and he just died. And I remember falling to my knees and letting out this wail, and it came from somewhere. So I don't know where it came from in me. It just dragged through my throat, and I was so sad. And it was it was a moment I'll never forget. And I remember being on my knees, the nurse leaning over, helping me up. And I remember this patient kind of walking over. He had roomy eyes, like glassy roomy eyes, and slick back hair that was kind of thinned out. And he patted me on the shoulder, and I could smell that horrible smell, but I thought he was also in the hospice to die. And I thought that he was offering me a kindness. Now I'm thinking, is that where this started? There's a lot to think about here.